people should be able to control currencies, because governments have systematically proven throughout time that they cannot manage it. The tokenization of everything is just really starting to roll out.
So good to have an Aussie crypto person, and no less the crypto king himself on the pod.
Fred Schebesta is the co-founder of Finder.com.au, a billion-dollar company with an estimated personal net worth of over $300 million.
Known as the Crypto King, he owns Sydney's iconic crypto castle and shares why crypto represents the paradigm shift humanity needs.
This country needs a reset. It will literally spiral down upon itself. You can't keep printing money. You can't keep relying on digging stuff out of the ground. It's either going to happen by the people, or someone else will come in and take it over.
Do you want to talk about your win with ASIC?
3 federal judges unanimously again agreed that ASIC was wrong and agreed with us.
Why should the average Australian care about Bitcoin and it winning as a tool for humanity?
No one can take your Bitcoin. No one's going to go and change the laws of Bitcoin.
Today we are joined by the one and only Fred Schebesta, who is a very well-known Australian entrepreneur. You may have seen him on various news articles or clips in the media. He is the owner of the Crypto Castle in Sydney, in South Coogee, this beautiful brutalist mansion on the ocean. And he is the founder of Finder, one of the most successful websites in Australia with around 4 million monthly visitors. But these days he advocates for the world of cryptocurrencies and the future world that will be impacted through the emergence of companies that are being built on these new technologies. It was really refreshing to talk to Fred because he understands Bitcoin deeply, but he's also an entrepreneur and investor and excited about the opportunities that crypto generally holds for young entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs of any kind coming up. We talk about the whole gamut in this particular interview. We cover his recent ASIC win, where he took them to court to fight for the future right of Australian entrepreneurs and people in the public to be able to access these products that are simply better, faster, and cheaper than the traditional finance world. I think you're going to find it really interesting. He's a super thoughtful person, very deep thinker, and it's a really unique interview. So with that said, enjoy. And if you don't already, like and subscribe. Throw some comments down below. Let us know you're enjoying it and share this content with your friends if you find it helpful. Thanks for that. We'll see you soon. Fred, welcome to the show, mate. So good to have an Aussie crypto person and no less the crypto king himself on the pod. How are you, mate?
I'm good. I'm really good. Bitcoin's up.
Happy days. So Fred, look, for a lot of people in my audience, they probably don't know who you are. They may have seen some sort of news clip on, I don't know, Channel 9 or whatever. They've seen the Crypto Castle, this big brutalist mansion on the beach or on the cliffs more so in Sydney. But just quickly, I don't want to spend too much time on your background, but just for people listening, who is Fred Schebesta? How did you get to where you are today? What's your background?
So I think I'm a bit of a creator. I like to build things. I've been building things since I was in my college room. Started my first company there, and then I built a bunch of companies throughout time. I sold a few as well, and I guess most notably I founded Finder.com.au, which is also Finder.com in the US and the UK and Canada. And then I've sort of gone very deep into crypto as well, and I have a deep passion for cryptocurrency. Built a few businesses there as well and sold a few. And, I'm a passionate creator, I like to do things differently.
Yeah. And for those who don't know, Finder, I mean, if you're an Aussie listening to this, I think it's $1 billion company now. It's a unicorn, is it? Today, I think it is.
I have no idea.
No idea. It's a big business, let's just say that. But you started off, you had a design agency initially, wasn't it? Like a digital agency, and then you morphed into it. And if you want to learn more about Fred's background, there's a great documentary on YouTube that I've watched that really gives you a good insight into that whole journey, which I think was fantastic from an entrepreneurial point of view. So Fred, I think a great place to start is I'm really curious, how does a guy like you find your way to crypto? Why are you so passionate about crypto coming from the tech world and now migrating and really advocating for crypto in Australia, better legislation, better frameworks, and And I think about the next generation of entrepreneurs coming through, and I think you're sort of leading them and funding them. Why are you so excited about crypto? What drew you there?
Well, I think that you know, the digitization of currency has been happening, you know, I'd say probably for the last good, I'd say 15 years. You know, we used to use a lot of paper, plastic, and we still do to some extent, but slowly over time, everything's become just digitized numbers that are sitting in a ledger. And I think the leap from, you know, 1971, the disconnection from the gold standard has just completely busted up and inflated currencies. Seigniorage is rife and out of control. And I think those two ideas are kind of fundamental. And I think the last one is that the people should be able to control currencies, because governments have systematically proven throughout time that they cannot manage it. And if you want, out of interest, anyone who's listening, go to Wikipedia and Google the number of failed currencies that exist throughout human history. It is an exorbitant list. You know, you can't use the Roman denario anymore, unfortunately. And that's because at the end of the Roman Empire, you know, most of the coins was just lead instead of gold, which had been stolen by the government throughout time. So I think the combination of those three things, and the other things that I love to combine is, you know, it's a combination of marketing, finance, and technology. Three things that I love combined together in one single thing. And I think this creates a huge opportunity for a new financial system. And I say new financial system, and I mean that in every sense of it. A lot of people don't like that. Like when I say that, they get really whatever. Like I keep saying it because it's happening, right? The tokenization of everything is just really starting to roll out. US is ramping up. You watch it, it'll roll out around the world. And I think that moment in time, right, there is a Cambrian explosion already of, you know, I would call it primitives that exist now. There are chains, there are decentralized applications, stable coins, real world assets, things which are the fundamental primitives. But the true change in moment in time in cryptocurrency, what will happen is when we go from all the money being in the infrastructure and all the money instead transferring now to the applications. And we saw that in the internet, right? The internet, Cisco was like the number one hottest stock, you know, the ones providing the internet, they were the super, super sexy ones. And now you look at it, all the value has gone now to the people who control the applications that deal with the customers. And that hasn't happened in crypto yet. It hasn't happened. You know, the chains are worth more. You know, you look at the top coins, it looks like the old stock market where Cisco was right up there, and you know, obviously that changed. But that moment in time is why I want so many Australian entrepreneurs, and obviously entrepreneurs around the world that are listening as well, to participate, and some of the greatest engineers to come and build businesses, because it's an opportunity is right now. Like it is right now. You can, with 5 to 6 people, or even 3 to 4 really good people, bond together and build something that millions of people, tens of millions of people, hundreds of millions of people will use all around the world. It is not located in any particular jurisdiction. This will be a global currency. It'll be a global financial system, and it'll be built by the people for the first time. Just like the internet's not controlled by anyone. That is the exact opportunity, and that is a huge change, and I would call it a paradigm shift in how humans do finance.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So, you know, I think just feeding back to you, what I heard there is that one of the major drives is that money itself is broken. We can't trust governments, and that's not just now, that's just history. We see the US, you know, in a huge amount of debt, like every reserve currency operator before them. They can't resist the money printer, and eventually they collapse. Historically, it's 100%. But then on the other side, separate to the base layer being the money, there's all the finance industry and services that operate off the money things like banks and loans and credit cards and all these other financial services. And if we look into the digital equivalent of that, would you say that sort of Bitcoin is sort of like the base layer of the money in the digital world, and then these other chains are the expressions and the use cases? Is that kind of, because a lot of our audience would be struggling, and at this point they just see them as like lottery tickets. Should I buy Solana, mate, over at the pub? Or what do you reckon? Is XRP going to go to $4? And that's the limit of their understanding of this revolution. So how would you describe, like, maybe a good thing to do is like maybe share with us one or two you think really exciting projects that are happening right now reliant on this new world of blockchain technology that is going to change the world.
Yeah, so I think anyone in crypto, if you're in it long enough, you'll buy Bitcoin, and then you go and explore a lot of other things, and then eventually everyone always comes back to Bitcoin. It's digital gold, it's scarce, and its narrative has only just begun. You're looking at what gold looked like 5,000 years ago when someone held it in their hands and gave it to someone and said, "This is really rare. What can I do with this? I have no idea what you mean." And I think that's people are treating that's like funny. It's almost hilarious what people would have done with gold, and hilarious what people have done with Bitcoins. Just bought pizzas for 10,000 Bitcoin. There's all sorts of things, right? And I think, if I was to go and the amount of research and people I've met, interviewed, journeys I've been on, and just straight conviction there is throughout the planet of and the world of number of people, that's what you're fundamentally investing in, right? There are people who, like, this is deep philosophical fundamental belief in what Bitcoin should be, can be, and will be, from people who started at the beginning, coded it, helped to code it, continue to mine it, support it in ways that you would, the conviction level is absolute. And you gotta be part of that, right? So storing wealth and storing your value throughout time. I just wanted to zoom out a second for everyone, because I think this might help, is, what do humans value throughout time? Well, you need certain conditions, things that have held their value. Like if we got $100, some Bitcoin and a piece of gold, and just buried it in the ground, put $1,000 of each in the ground right now, and fast forward at 100 years, what would each be worth? Well, probably the $100 be worth almost nothing. The Bitcoin's probably worth maybe 100 grand, and gold maybe 100 grand as well. Who knows? I'm not going to forecast the prices of them exactly, but you get the idea, right? Time and change is an ever-present force in the universe that we coexist in, and what we look for are things which are able to trespass that and jump throughout time and be consistent and divisible, immutable, and scarce. And there's only 21 million Bitcoin, and there only will be 21 million Bitcoin. And that is what you're investing in. And it's the same with gold. The only thing I think about with gold is if you went and got a meteorite, I think humans were getting pretty aggressive on our space travel. If you went and got a meteorite, you could just get a bunch of gold and bring it to Earth, and you would completely disrupt the entire gold market. So digitally, through code and very difficult mathematical problems, that cryptographically protect that scarcity, is what you're investing in, and that you're basically protected by maths in a large degree. So if I was to boil that down, that's something I think fundamentally that humans have been searching throughout time. Pieces of real estate do that to some extent, but the problem is a government can come and take your real estate. Pieces of jewelry do appreciate. Again, someone can steal it from you. Stamps and art throughout time. My grandfather took a whole bunch of stamps and traveled out of, a Russian-controlled post-Nazi Austria and traveled to Australia and brought his wealth through stamps. And that used to be a currency, right? He has some interesting pictures on some of his stamps. Let's put it that way. Art. There's only certain scarce forms of that. Pokemon cards, originals, yes. We've seen that. There are things, certain cars, but you're getting very fragile, right? That's not as immutable as you go down the list. I think that, another thing that we've seen, there are transient things, right, that are valuable, then they're not valuable. And it's what you see in crypto. I think what you're talking to is a lot of people have this experience where they see these things that, that could be really valuable, and everyone's really interested, and then everyone leaves. And, you go back in time and to study that would be looking at sort of tulip mania. I'm sure you can put some link in the show notes around this. The hype of the .com boom, where it got super, super hot. I think AI stocks are hitting that level where some of these numbers are now hitting, they're a bit blown over, if that makes sense. And I think it happens, a natural cycle, right, of exuberance, and then it comes back down. And I think Bitcoin saw that, but the problem is with Bitcoin, people are saying, it's a bubble at $1, it's a bubble at 10, it's a bubble at $100, it's a bubble at 1,000, it's a bubble at 10,000, it's a bubble at 100,000. Like, when are you going to stop? Like, when are you going to go, okay, this is not, and I think the best example of that is things which do go through these cycles but survive, like Amazon. Amazon went through the .com boom, its stock dropped immeasurably, but the difference was that Amazon focused on its customer and delivering service to it, and you can't fail a company that'll do that. Enduringly, dedicatedly, passionately focused on their customer and delivering services that they want. That's a great company. That's what they're in. They're in the business of serving their customer. They're not in the business of the internet. The internet was just a medium, just like Disney is in the business of telling stories. First, they started out on rolls of film. Then they went and put it on VHS. Then they took the same stories and sold them on DVDs. Now they're selling it on streaming. These guys are just creaming it with the same stories, right, over and over. That's a great business. That's a real business. So I think a few other coins, if I was to talk to, I don't know if this is, interesting.
No, I think it's a good segue, because it's interesting discovering. I know you've got a Bitcoin ring on, and you're an interesting one because it sounds like you sort of fully get, like, you're orange pilled. You understand the spiritual implications and the impact on humanity, if you like, of having sound money. But you're also an entrepreneur and an investor, and you're interested in the layers that get built and can change the world. And so as an entrepreneur and investor, and you can see those opportunities. And I'm excited to hear what you see coming in the crypto space. And I also want to talk to you about your recent action with ASIC, because I think it's so important that we have people like you that have brains and resources and can speak out and advocate for the industry. So I want to talk about that in a minute, but yeah, so it is possible to be a Bitcoin believer, so to speak, but also be an investor in what people think of as altcoins, but they're really tech startups, and they're entrepreneurial, and they can change the world as well. Unfortunately, spiced in there is a whole bunch of scammers and shitheads, but there are legit projects out there that are going to change the world. And I'd love to hear from you, like, for somebody listening, what do you see as a real world use case? Maybe we could talk about the tokenization of assets, so that somebody who's maybe a boomer watching this goes, oh my God, that makes perfect sense. But they just see crypto tokens as these gambling chips.
Yeah, I think if I was just to start in where I'd start, and I think it goes down a fairly large rabbit hole. I think one of the, some of which I've been fascinated by and believed in is stable coins. I believe and I saw this back in 2021. I thought Circle was the most undervalued company in crypto, and I was trying to buy its stock so badly, but they wouldn't sell it, right?
You were right.
And they the interest rates were terrible. They were losing money for so long. But let's just talk to that for a second. Okay, what's the use case? What's the problem?
What is it? Yeah, what is a stablecoin for the listener? Yeah.
Yeah, so stablecoin is a one-to-one representation of a fiat currency. So if you want to move, if I want to send Adam $100 today in value, I can send him a stablecoin over a blockchain, and I can choose a range of different blockchains, and I can send it from my wallet to his, and I don't need to call a bank. I don't need to call a third party. I don't need to speak to anyone. I can just send that any time of day. And that use case of transferring money, initially for a lot of people who are in countries where transferring money just happens. In Australia, the rails are fine. India, the rails are great. America, it can be a bit bumpy, but eventually the FedWire system does work. And Visa and MasterCard fill a lot of gaps. Europe works, UK works, right, to some extent. But there are many countries where, for example, I have a animator. This is just a real life example, and he's in he's in Lithuania, right? And I'm like, okay, you've got a Lithuanian bank, you've done this work, we need to send you 600 euros. Okay, cool. The amount of work for my team to go and load up a Lithuanian bank account, to go and figure out all the Swift details and make sure it doesn't mess up, and some intermediary is quite arduous, let's put it that way, to get it exactly right. And instead, he just gave us a Bitcoin address. We sent the funds directly to him instantaneously. And all of those costs and all of that administration internally for my team, for his team, is removed. And he can just take that, sell that, and transfer it to his bank account. It can go to his accountants. It is an incredibly empowering financial tool for companies, individuals who need to receive money. Remittance business around the world is obviously, I don't need to go into how big that business is, but it's a huge business, right? And I think that is kind of, what's really challenging probably is, the Bitcoin white paper was talking about a peer-to-peer payment system to some extent. And I do think people pay each other in Bitcoin as well to remove doubt. I do think that does happen. There are hardcore believers in that sense. But this is just, I think some people, it may be a transition. It may not be. I'm not sure. But because if fiat currencies completely blow up, then that will change things. And it may be that there are stable coins that represent in some way, shape, or form Bitcoin, they're Bitcoin backed or something. I'm not sure. That's just where it gets very complex. But today and now, and at least for as long as these organizations and governments hold on to the fiat control of people paying taxes in their local countries, people are going to have to go and send money to other people. And that keeps these fiat currencies alive. And I think, let's start with that use case, right? So sending money. Now, what do you need to do then? Well, firstly, you need some sort of organization to go in to power that. I think that's fine. The second thing you need is to put it on a blockchain. And so I was talking before about, the Ciscos and AOLs of, these .com booms. And a lot of that was, it is done and is built things like Ethereum, Arbitrum, Solana, Tron, like all. I'm not going to, I don't really want to get into exactly one versus the other, whatever it may be. But those chains enable these payments. And I think that's a really strong use case, right? That is something we need, and they get paid a small fee for transferring those funds immutably with permissionlessly 24/7, 365 days a year. And you don't need to call anyone. You don't need to call them. It works. And I think that's a solid building block and use case, right?
In
And I'm
Dubai,
bullish on that.
in Dubai, we spoke to somebody recently. He was talking to us about the first real estate that's being tokenized onto the blockchain. And for the listeners, a blockchain basically serves the role of a bank's computer system almost, isn't it? Like the bank's job is to, if I send Fred $100, it takes 100 off my balance and puts 100 in Fred's, and the bank's in the middle. The blockchain is like the middle piece, and these blockchains serve different purposes. Maybe you could talk to about what tokenization is of real world assets, and maybe an example for people sort of understand and where you see good fits.
Yeah. I think the tokenization, if I was to try and communicate that in for anyone listening, if you were to imagine when you purchase a piece of real estate, how do you know you own it? Or you have a piece of paper that's a title, and that title gives you legal, I guess, rights in some way, shape, or form to that piece of land. And tokenization is that exact same thing of real world assets, where you have the token and therefore you have a piece of that real world asset. Real world asset just means something that exists in the world. And an example of that is gold. So there are gold tokens. You can buy gold. You buy the token and you have a representation of gold. And this company, this organization, holds that actual gold, just like Fort Knox in the US holds gold, and they say how much they've got. They attest to how much they have. And this organization, one of them is called Paxos, will hold that gold and attest to holding it. Now, that's obviously very simple, but it's actually brilliant because, anyone can go and access it. What we're starting to see now is the tokenization of stocks. So you can buy NVIDIA or Google or whatever stock you want to buy, Coinbase, in the US, and you can purchase that and have the ability to hold a portfolio of stocks without going through a broker, without going through a third party, and holding that token gives you that same value and representation of the stock. And
but could you trade it? Could you trade it 24/7?
You can trade 24/7.
Even when the market's closed, I could send you some Apple stock peer-to-peer through the blockchain instead of having to wait from Monday to Friday and the market's been closed. That's 100%. Incredible.
It's bizarre. It's almost hilarious that the stock market trades from it's almost 10:30 to 4:30. It's like it's almost baffling. It's like, and they used to not trade apparently after lunch on Wednesdays because they had to go and collect all the tickets together and work out who's got what. And you got to remember that's what this stuff still has. There are clearinghouses that still shuffle pieces of paper around.
And it shines a light, Fred, on why the incumbent, the existing. There's so much money in the existing architecture, the banks, the brokers, entire office buildings filled with human beings facilitated around this draconian mechanism. Whereas we could be living in a world where you open your phone and you have your blockchain enabled stock portfolio that's there 24/7 without any of those people. And you're saying, the rails work pretty well in Australia, unless you're trying to buy Bitcoin or crypto. But then all of a sudden the banking rails stop working in Australia. And it's no wonder why. We're like, I'd be interested in your perspective, but you're investing in these companies and you do business globally. How do you rate Australia's embrace of Bitcoin and crypto relative to the US right now, for example?
So I think Australia was quite ahead initially, and we were quite positive. We had a tax ruling. We had, some really good actual embracement of exchanges, good rails. Banks were actually super, worked with exchanges. It was actually working really well. And then the US just went full nuclear anti-crypto because the banking industry lobbied the government to go and kill it basically. And that, what's brilliant about the US is that what I admire about them is for all their failings, they swing back, and they change. And that's the remarkable part. That is what makes America an incredible organization and country, and very founding amazing principles. Whereas in Australia now, it's still they followed the US, started suing people with zero laws written, and started regulating by enforcement without any grounds or means. And the funny thing is, the thing that triggered all of this, was FTX, which was an exchange blowing up, and regulators, being annoyed by that. I haven't heard yet of a court case in Australia for FTX, or some of the people that were involved with it, maybe the legal teams or anything. And here's the other kicker. They had an AFSL. They had a license in Australia. So, who got fired for approving that? Who did the due diligence on this organization? Instead, in Australia, they went after, and have gone after, yes, there's probably, a few, I'd say, straight scammers that have stolen or fraud, been, involved with fraud. Great. But the actual big cases were for companies and organizations trying to be compliant with legal advice, to comply with laws that were written in 2001, the Corporations Act, before cryptocurrency was ever invented, with definitions that are very clear, written in law, have case law with them, and started suing people. And they have been losing. And the thing is, no one's being held accountable. No one's come and gone, hey, you're spending our taxpayer money and just firing bullets at people without writing laws. You're basically shooting the Wright brothers before they had a pilot's license and going, you can't fly a plane. Or, Burke and Wills, Burke and Wills crossing over the Blue Mountains, and they're saying, oh, you're in real estate and you need to get a license to go and create new land. It's like, or the horse industry, the car, Henry Ford rolls out the Ford Motor Company, and people start driving cars, and they go around suing people for driving this new thing. Like, insane. Just, that's the level of and I think that the thing that frustrates me the most about this is that Australia used to be a country of a fair go, of progression and possibility. And now, as a country, you've got, and this is the puzzling part to me right now, is even more puzzling, is that you've got one party controlling Australia. They have all the control. No one can do anything. And they have no vision, no goals, and instead just letting it ride, letting it get more and more bureaucracy, more constriction, continuously writing laws, and stopping Australians from progressing. This country needs a reset. And it's either going to happen by the people, or someone else will come in and take it over, because it will literally spiral down upon itself. You can't keep printing money. You can't keep relying on digging stuff out of the ground. Eventually, someone's going to come and take it. You can't keep this protectionism, small mindset, small like litigiousness, continuously writing and constricting its people. You can't keep, it's still a convict nation to a large degree. You're living in a prison of laws when there are no laws. You need to write the laws. That's not how it works. And I think there's going to be a big reset in Australia. I forecast.
How do you, when you say reset, what do you mean specifically by that?
So I think that the basis upon which the value is of way value is created in this country and stored and operated and regulated will be upended, and it will be done by the people or by force. In other words, someone else, some other country will just see this country at its knees because it's failed to innovate, failed to go and progressively move forward and compete on a global scale, and whittled away to insignificance. And the way it'll do that is it'll strangle itself. People don't, people say this, most companies, they don't fail. They actually die from suicide. People just, the founders leave. That's what happens eventually. Companies should never stop working. If the founders don't leave, then eventually they'll get up. And that's what's happening in Australia. There will be a reset of the way in which, one, and I say about regulation, talking about like you've got the king ruling the country, like that's puzzling to me. We're doing 1700s ideologies. We move past that. I think you've got a country where you are mining stuff out and you are not building this sovereign wealth of Australians. We are like handing over all these profits to these companies, and the sovereign, like you look at Norway, look at the Qatar, the sovereign wealth of Australia should be probably one of the top 10 richest nations of per capita in the world for the amount of stuff that gets dug out of the ground and sent overseas. It should just be royalties galore. And there's plenty of fat in it. And the last thing I'll say is you've got, unfortunately, a nation where progression is not valued, where discourse, where rejection of the status quo is not valued. It is cut down, and it's cut down by the media, which is a bonkers thing to me. The media should be bigging up this small nation, small, insignificant, tiny island of 25 million people. There are 20 million people in Tokyo. Like, it's puzzling, right? Like, have some perspective. And I think that is going to be a great reset. These are tectonic plate forces, which I believe will culminate in a great reset of Australia.
Yeah, I mean, I worry deeply about the future because outside of mining, which we're giving the profits away to corporations, and the average Australian wealth is not growing, as you said, directly from it. And I think about the future Freds, and I think about the future Melanie Perkins and the future Mike Cannon-Brooks and guys that are no doubt in your circle. What's the incentive for them to stay in Australia when they're working at the high end of the complexity index, which is what we need? We rank so poorly on the complexity index globally. We basically dig holes in the ground and sell it and then buy it back for 10 times more than we sold it for. But we need, in a small country like what we have, the future versions of you that create value and jobs and taxes to stay in Australia. Do you think they're going to leave if they're not incentivized, or where do you see it? Because the tech is just making the world a much smaller place, and people can be anywhere. Or do you think they'll just stay out of loyalty? What are you seeing and hearing?
I've seen over the last 5 years a great exodus of Australian entrepreneurs out of this country. Most people leave or have left, and they all build their business in other countries that are more favorable: Dubai, Singapore, even like the UK. Yeah, there's many forward-looking nations, and I think America's become is always progressive as well, right? Like, great talent there. And it just gets to a point where you just don't need to deal with it. These Canva's moved out of Australia. They actually had funding from the New South Wales government to begin, right? That's how Canva began. They got funding from the government, and now they're left. They stopped paying taxes. Sure, they'll pay payroll tax and things like that, but like, and I get it, like, just to a large degree, but like, why couldn't we keep that company? Why couldn't we keep it? What was the actual root cause? What's going to stop all that tax being paid in this country? Well, I think that's well covered and well documented. And I'm not saying I have all the answers. Like, I'm not but I do think those three areas I'd sort of talked about: progression, regulation, and sovereign wealth. They need to be addressed. And let's try. I just want to, if I can just build one thing on that, I think the Liberal Party, with all its failings and it's down on its knees right now, has an opportunity. That's actually an opportunity.
I agree.
Because it's got nothing to lose. It's already out and down for the count. So now it can be rebuilt. And I just hope that they rebuild it to a place, or someone else rebuilds it to a place of where you have a vision, where you believe and you have principles and tenets that are rebooted for the modern era of Australia. I put that out there. I'm putting that out to the universe there, Adam, and anyone else is listening.
Mate, I love it. I mean, I agree with you. It needs a reset, and I think it'll come about when enough pain is felt and enough people have left, or people are going, look, we've got to start. We've got to change, and we have to become politically far more active, far less passive. And Australians have just had it so good for so long. But unfortunately, we're changing the guard. Our baby boomers are retiring, and we need young people to come up and be inspired and want to stay with the personality of Australia and not just the way it looks. I have this sort of joke I say to people: Australia's sort of become like this really good-looking person with a bad personality at the moment. They need to get the personality back in check. But for young Aussies listening to this, right, like, you're probably moving, I imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I imagine you're sort of in your early to mid-40s, I guess, now. So you've been a hardcore entrepreneur for those 20 years, and you're now in the place of investing and backing young entrepreneurs. And there's many smart young Aussies. I'm in Bali at the moment, and every second person I bump into is an Aussie. And to be honest, it's actually restored my faith in young Australians, because they're so smart and hungry and driven, right? And they're working on stuff. Like, what do you say to a young Fred who, like, what if they knock on your door at the Crypto Castle? What would get your attention? Like, what excites you as an investor in this space? What do you look for in people, and what kind of ideas in the crypto space? Or maybe you give us an example of a company that you've backed, like Derive or one of the other. I'm sure you've got plenty of projects on the go, but maybe you could tell us a real world story of someone who's knocked on your door and you've gone, this kid's going somewhere, we're going to back them. What made it great?
Yeah, I'll start. I think I like to hear something different. And the second thing is I like to hear a story. And the third thing I look for is, I'm going to call it religious persistence in the founders. So I'll sort of break those three things down. And I think Derive's a good example of that. Nick, who's the leader there, does a great job. And, they haven't had it easy. It's hard to do options on chain. It's really hard. And to do it at institutional grade, really, really hard. And that's what they're doing. That's what they've done. And that is I'd say, an example to me of persistence. So that was a check for me. It's different because people looked at that problem and went, no, that's just not even possible. Lots of people have tried it, but to get it right, get the maths right, get the clearing right, get the exchange right, so hard. Get the market makers, get all the liquidity, so hard. That's different to me. And I think with guys like that, you've got a really solid team, persistent, they're willing to go through and persist through, really tough time. And they've had a really tough time. Um, they're doing it differently. I think that's really strong, and I think it's just some of those things just take time to play out. And to me, I thought that was a great organization to go and help. And I think, and I'm very bullish on them. I think it's great. And I think it's a great example of a use case as well, right? It's something where anyone can now participate in options. I think if I was to, if someone was to knock on my door now, and I'm going to give a different example. I had this conversation. This is very deep. A guy I respect, he asked me to go and have a chat with his son. He wasn't sure what to do. He told me about, some of his real estate ventures, and he worked as an agent, and, he was a good sales guy, right? He said, what should I do? I'm thinking of building this business. He pitched a whole, like some pretty good ideas. I was like, oh, that's a pretty good idea. I don't know whether it has scale, right? It's maybe it'll get there, maybe not. And I think that, what I said to him, this is absolutely brutal, but I just said, and what I would do if I was you, he's just like, what would you do? I said, I'd get on a plane right now, fly either to New York City or San Francisco, call up 50 founders and say, I'll work for free for you. Get in on the ground floor and build your way up to the front line of American innovation, growth, and you will be of service to them. You will do whatever is required, and you will learn, several lifetimes of knowledge in the span of 18 months. And that is what I would do. And whatever's required to go and do that. Scratch, fight, do whatever you need to do. I think the one that I skipped before, by the way, Adam, was a story. I think a good story, it's a simple story, but one that people can talk. Options on chain is a simple story. It makes sense. The options market is bigger than the spot market in the world. And I think it'll happen in crypto as well. And I think those three things, right? So something different, story and persistence in the founder. But that's genuinely my advice. I told this kid, and I don't know if he's done it yet or not. I should follow up probably. But I think anyone who's coming to me and you don't have a deep customer insight or something different, like, I just, yeah, you got those three things. Can you tell a good story? Are you persistent? Because I can't tell you what the company's going to do, right? Companies change and they evolve. I can't tell you whether you got a good idea or not. Actually, all I care about is how committed and how persistent are you prepared to go and be. That's a big determining factor. Because I've seen founders that I've backed, and they just keep going. They're relentless, and eventually they get product market fit, and eventually they win. I'd say I'm probably one of those guys, right? Like my first business wasn't that successful, but I just kept building stuff, and that's what I keep doing, right? I keep making things. I think that's the root.
I hope the listeners didn't miss what Fred said there. Like, there isn't failure. If you back the right founder, the fact that the guy will or the girl will pivot and keep going until they find that product market fit. And the takeaway from that is, one, persistence, but secondly, smart people don't always win, right? Like, most of my career, it's a collection of failures with 2 or 3 home runs, but the rest of it was just a shitstorm of failure, right? And that's just how it is. And for young Aussies listening, I think that's really good advice to expose themselves internationally to the world. And Peter Thiel has a quote which came to mind when you were saying, he said, I ask founders, what do you know about your industry and niche that really smart people in that industry or niche don't know? And it's that insight, that special insight that's true. And you guys, I heard it on the documentary about the Finder story. It was like you were trying 5 or 10 different things, and then it was the credit card comparison that just went nuts, and nothing came even close to that. And so then you started aggregating credit card information, and that was really the thing that birthed Founder. a finder, on its journey. And so I think that's really powerful. Do you want to talk, I know we're going to be out of time in just a second, just to close it off, about your win with ASIC and what lessons you got from that? Because it was a big thing, I think, to, go to the market, basically offer a product, which was people put money with Finder into the Finder wallet. You offered a return. And then ASIC stepped in and basically tried to cripple the innovation. And most times that would have worked. I would imagine that most companies would just capitulate, pay their fine, and move on. But you pushed back and said, hang on a second, let's fight about this in court. And then you won. Maybe you could break down, just in simple terms, what happened and why you actually went to the time and risk and expense. And it would have been significant, I'm betting, to go through that process. Why did you do it, and how important was that?
Yeah, so we were working on a product that I felt could really help Australians because there was no yield around. And what you would do is you would take fiat currency, Australian dollars, transfer it into a stable coin, and then you would lend that to us, and we would give you back a return. And that is actually most akin to securities lending. So this is probably a very deep niche, but a domain. If you have stocks and you have them with an investment bank, they will go and lend those stocks out and give you a small return. So you can lend your stocks. That's not a lending contract. That's actually, it's not a there is a loan and a credit for the actual underlying, but it is a different arrangement to a loan. And what ASIC claimed is that we had created a sham or a fraud where people weren't actually turning this into crypto. And instead it was a debenture. And the funny thing is, here's the serendipity strange thing is, I went and read the Corporations Act, and I read the actual debenture section. I read every single definition. I knew every single component of this legislation. So when they came at us, I said, no, I've been through this personally. I've been through it with several extremely smart lawyers, and they agree with me that this is not a debenture. Firstly, because it's not money, it's cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency is not money in this country. That's not the definition. What ASIC themselves, the RBA, and the tax officers claim, it's commodity. So it's more akin to an apple. And if I went to you and said, hey, Adam, here, you want to come and buy some apples for me? And you're like, sure. You buy 10 apples and I say, well, you know what, Adam, if you lend me those apples, those 10 apples, I'll give you a quarter of a slice every month for you lending me those apples because I need to go use them. And you're like, sure. And that's the arrangement that this is. And that's what we argued in court. And Her Honor, the first federal judge, agreed with us. 36 comprehensive pages agreeing with the way in which that product is structured. And ASIC then, I don't think, so when I actually first spoke to ASIC, they threatened me with criminal action to actually go to jail for 5 years for not having a license. So there's a criminal act. That's a fairly significant letter to receive.
Who do you think was behind that? Do you think it was just ASIC, or do you think that there was a nudge from financial institutions to tap old Fred on the shoulder?
Yeah, people don't like the Wright brothers making airplanes.
Well, when they've got such a monopoly on that whole sector, and you come in and they realize if he gets away with this, this is actually going to potentially open the door to us being dethroned.
I don't know everything that went down, but I've never seen someone, come at someone vexatiously when there's no financial harm to anyone. In fact, we just pay people for their returns. And
anyone except the
destroy
incumbents.
a product, right? And just it's part. You're right, and the speculation to me that can, I don't know. I've never been told that. No one's gonna.
No, I'm just interested. I mean, yeah.
But you're right. It just did occur to me this is bizarre behavior, and so they then appealed that. They said, "Oh, you're wrong," to the federal judge. And I thought, and I turned around and, we could have backed down. I said, no, we're not wrong. And Her Honor has agreed with us. Many lawyers have agreed with us. I've read the legislation. I personally went through it, and I know what we have done is correct. And it is not a financial product. And by the laws of this nation, that's really important. But the laws that were written, it is not. You go and change the laws, sure, we're going to need to do some stuff, right? But they didn't write any laws. They just went and sued, took me to court, and we're talking millions of dollars here. Like unbelievable amounts of pain.
Oh, I get it.
It's beyond, it hurt inside Finder very, very badly. And you're never going to get that back, right? But then we went and fought them again, and 3 federal judges unanimously again agreed that ASIC was wrong and agreed with us. And so now they have to pay us our costs. And I think, reflecting upon that, what's sort of trying to answer your question, what's the lessons learned? I think the number one is that if you're going to be a pioneer, people are going to come at you, and they're going to come and try and shut you down. And the reason for that is because the rewards on the other side are so big. To get to the other side is going to be hard. I think James Dyson's a great example of that. 15 years of making his cyclonic vacuum cleaner in his backyard until he finally manufactured personally his own first vacuum cleaner. Brutal experience, crushing debt for 15 years on himself. Unbelievable, great story. Pioneer. I admire him so much. And I think the lesson is if you back yourself and if you have done the work, you should decline the people that are trying to shut you down because they're probably wrong, and go for it. That's the number one thing I have taken from this is now I don't, people like question me. You can imagine, and I was seen. It was a brutally, personally, and I said no. I declined that.
But it gives you, I was just going to say, it gives you a strength now, I suppose, and a lack of fear of the court systems when you've been through something like this, when you morally know you're right, and you backed yourself against the Goliath, and you won. And you won for all, I think, Australian crypto companies in the DeFi space. So I think that's a great thing, man.
I appreciate that, Adam. Yeah, it's not been without its scars, let's put it that way.
Are you going to do anything with that win, or was it just a moral thing for you, or are you guys going to enter the space now on the basis of that ruling, or are you going to wait to see if they take you to the Supreme?
So they forfeited taking us to the High Court. They chose not to. So that is done forever, nailed in to history, never to be
case law.
There will always be case law about that. That is the
congrats.
fact.
Congrats.
Yeah, which is good. I think it's good. I think the challenging part right now is they're trying to move the goalposts. Treasury's written a bunch of stuff. So I'm like, I just want to let it settle because I don't want to go necessarily fight again.
Yeah.
If you're going to move the goalposts around me, and they, and I learned from that experience that it's not a fair thing. It's not about being fair. And there are people inside the government, they don't care about a company and the people that are working there. That's not their job. Their job is they just want to get a name for themselves. They'd sit there, they do their thing, here's my law, and I'm just going to go and tear down things because, governments don't build much. They can't build houses in this country. They definitely can't build industries. And anytime they build a bridge or a railway line, it's $2 billion over budget. They can't build anything efficiently, but they can tear stuff down and they can stop things really, really well. That's what they do well.
It's a sad indictment on our government, but it's true. All right, look, you've been super generous with your time, Fred, and I know you've got to prep for another call. Last question for you, for the average Aussie watching this, and we'll just restrict it to Bitcoin because, a lot of our audience are new in, and I think you probably agree a great place to start if you're moving into the world of crypto and digital. Bitcoin's maybe base number one, and then from there you can start to expand off. Why should the average Australian care about Bitcoin and it winning as a tool for humanity?
So, I think I talked a little bit about this before. I think the history of time is a massively, a story which is sits with the ones that survive are the ones that adapt to change. And I think Darwin wrote that. He said, of all the things and all the species I studied, the ones that survived were the ones that adapted to change the best. And humans are looking for that value, right? We're looking for something we can store value throughout time. Australians love their real estate. That's definitely one thing. The problem with real estate, is that it can be taken away from you and it can be taxed, legislated. All sorts of things could potentially happen in time when it comes to real estate. Wars can happen. Vaucluse used to be a very not sought after place because one of the missiles went off there, and a few people remember that, but it's not something it's something that can be taken from you, and there are many assets like that. It can be taxed, it can be legislated against. But what I think people need to know is your Bitcoin, no one can take your Bitcoin. No one can change. No one's going to go and change the laws of Bitcoin. You can't. There are no tariffs in Bitcoin, especially
self-custody.
Sure. I assume most people listening eventually will get to that place where they realize that they will hold their own keys to their wallets. But hopefully that's where most people get to. And I think that's really important, right? I think it's a very, very fundamental idea of self-sovereignty that is starting, and it feels like to me in 2025 it wasn't something which was spoken about very much, and now the more and more inflation, the more prices go up, the more confusion, why people don't understand why this is happening and things become so unaffordable. Eventually the pot's going to boil over. And as it gets closer, people are going to start going, hey, how do I get out of this? And you don't want to be the one on last getting on that boat when there's no life jackets left. And that's what I think Bitcoin provides a way for you to exit, to leave digitally with assurance from mathematics to back that up. And I think that's a serious innovation of humanity. And I think it's something which I think well worth having at least a little look at.
Yeah, to just not be on zero, secured by math and energy and billions of dollars of hardware. Sorry, take
a little bit, a little bit won't be terrible.
Yeah. And you say that as somebody who's got obviously some real estate and that rock star plan. The first time I saw that, I was like, oh my God, look at this place. I love brutalist architecture. Your pad's sick. And we might put some little B-roll at the start of this so people can see it. It became quite famous. But Fred,
it's an NFT. I think it's like an NFT.
Is it really cool?
It's an NFT in atoms. It's an NFT in atoms.
Is that right? There you go.
Yeah.
Dude, you've been very, very generous with your time. We really, really do appreciate it. And I know you got to get onto another call, but thank you so much. And is there anywhere that you want people to follow you from here or not?
Yeah, hop on, I'm on Instagram or TikTok. People are pretty passionate about those platforms. And I try and be as constructive as I possibly can and boil things down or explain topics there. So yeah, come on.
So it's just your name, right? Fred Schebesta, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll put the links below. Fred, thank you very much. We'll see you soon. Bye for now.
Hey there, I hope you enjoyed that episode of Unemployable. If you'd like to watch another episode, just click there.